Said no.
Tony's not, no, there we go.
How are you?
There we go. Tally's here.
Rachel, yeah.
Rachel, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Why we're blur background. We go with that today or what's going on? Should I not do blur? This is one of those little meeting hall video cameras. So.
We just buttoned up.
It's fun though, I like doing that. Yeah, I love the progress, like the security and the kind of actual work that's like tangible. Yeah,
I can relate to that.
I love, that's one of my favorite things, I love organizing, I love. We have a lot of people.
Okay, I am, are you guys all like ready? This is now needed.
Everybody's on?
Yep, Rachel is on and I think Rachel Bloman. How many, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So
We're good.
we're quorum. I just gotta hit record. Wherever that is.
We'll edit it. Time is 3 o'clock. We're recording? Good. All right, the time is 3 o'clock, so call the meeting of the Parks and Recreation Board to order on Wednesday, May 14th. And have you noted the roll?
I have,
Yes. Okay. Approval of the minutes of March 12th, 2025. Do we have a motion? Second. And any discussion or changes, modifications? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes. Awesome. And no, there's no appearances. Anybody online to appearance?
hold on. Fine again.
Oh, 2 people entered the waiting room.
Someone else online? I don't know if they must have popped off, but
So just double check, is there any appearances for items not on the agenda? Online? Nope. Right. New business, no unfinished business. So new business, 2026-2030 capital budget discussion. Jake?
yeah, so
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, I know you are our new chairperson, and Rachel is our co-chair.
Yep.
I haven't met her
Oh,
before. so
gotcha. That's a good idea. Yes.
Introduction.
Sorry. Yeah, Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So hi everyone, Rachel Kugel was appointed as co-chair of the Parks and Rec Board. So excited to be here. I have a lot to learn in all of my new roles as alderperson. So bear with me. But yeah, excited to be a part of this group.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody want to go around and introduce yourselves to Rachel? I'll start with you, Pat.
Okay, I'm Pat Howell. I've been on the park board for over 30 years, so long time. So welcome, Rachel. Good to have you on board.
Hi Rachel, I'm Kelly Slack with the parade and Slack Attack, and I've been on forever.
Hi Rachel, Missy, you know me, Park and Rec.
Hi, Rachel, Jeff Hins, and I think it's 12, 13 years or so that I've been on. Got a lot of lifers on that.
Yes. And Rachel G.
Hey, Rachel Froman, When you said we have a new co-chair, I thought I got assigned a new position when I was absent from the last meeting. But Rachel Groman, I'm a relatively newer member, maybe been on for like 5 or 6 years or so. But welcome.
Anyone else?
And Jake,
Oh,
we met before, Jake Anderson, Park and Rec Director, since 2008, and on resident since 2016.
all right. Introductions are out of the way, so moving on to the 2026-2030 capital budget discussion. Jake.
So I just wanted to bring this month because it's a good time to start thinking about what we're looking at in the park system. This is what was approved for the 25 to 29 capital budget. And each year kind of priorities shift and morph. As we move forward, there's still a few items that, as we're looking at long-term and medium-term, as it relates to facilities and potentially anything new. And so as we get into this season, and we're going to still do a bike ride here, sometimes, normally we do May, but maybe June might be where we go around to the different parks. I think early indications of administration is that we're going to have less flexibility for parks capital funding from a general obligation borrowing. And so we need to be a little more strategic and thoughtful on what we're proposing and what's realistic within the confines of the city budget. There is also another agenda item that will be coming in future months regarding to the parkland dedication funding that we get, and there's new apartments being built in town. So for example, the one on Winona Drive, X number of units times $1,400 because they can dedicate green space goes into a fund that is used for other revenues. That was assigned by former Mayor O'Connor to fund the storage facility at Aluska Park, and I'll provide an update on that project but there are negotiations that happen at both the Planning Commission and CDA that sometimes reduce that amount that could be used for parkland dedication or eliminate it. So when we did the current facility, for example, they didn't pay any parkland dedication, but they gave us the spot for the concession stand. So there's a little bit of back and forth on what we should be using that money for and how quickly, and maybe some, hopefully what I would consider as a strong recommendation from this committee that those fees do not be for any future development. Since we're getting tighter with places to develop, and that funding might be one of our primary sources of maintenance and adding to existing facilities, then I think we're going to have to be pretty strategic about that. So I don't want to go through every project other than a couple things that I know for sure that won't be in here in the next 5 years. Everything kind of revolves from the city aspect around whether we're going to move forward with a public safety building and a city campus building. And so I anticipate that those is going through committee from our staff meeting this morning, and that we would have a better direction within the next month or so, and whether that's something that's going to be pursued or not. If not, we will continue to propose maintenance related items at facilities that we currently own. And then we look at, from a parks perspective, how we're giving their best bang for our buck. And so we were pretty small on this year's capital budget overall. It was very limited in what we've done in years past, and some other items that were traditionally in the capital budget that switched over to the operating budget of the referendum. So things like trash cans, playground surfacing material, benches, replacement and repair, those are now in the operating budget. So you'll not see those in the capital budget anymore. Large scale park improvement projects at Aluska and Winnequa. At this point, I'm delaying of moving out of the 5-year budget because I just don't think that there's going to be an appetite to do any sort of approval with general obligation funding for those. We're going to look at maintaining what we have to the best of our ability and replacing equipment as needed in the next 5 years. But there are opportunities and I'll just point out three that we're probably gonna be looking at. Is what we do with Maywood School as our partnership with the school district. There's been discussions about what happens at the end of the 5-year lease with the school in the district and what their appetite is to keep maintaining that facility. And whether there's interest in potentially selling it to the city and looking at a long-term plan for redeveloping that site, whether it be for a community center or a continuation of our after-school and summer camp program, and or senior center and or completely redeveloping it to, private sector housing or others. So that will be probably the biggest thing that we're entertaining from our perspective over the next couple of years. The program continues to increase in popularity and numbers. Last summer, we were averaging about 100 kids per camp each week during the 10-week period. This week, our high week is 140 and or 150. So that's a 50% increase in 1 year. And luckily, we're at a facility that can handle that kids spot different locations. So as we continue to still see our population with children, I think increasing, or as houses are turning over, I think the eye test or those of us that are around here and to see lots of kids, around and about, that tracks with what is being requested for service. And that's with childcare and school time programming. And then we look at what facilities are kind of accompanying those and where our biggest usage is in the city. So Winnequa Park still is leader in usage on a day-to-day basis and on rentals and on events. And so I believe those improvements or those items that can be addressed for our events will be highlighted, at least in my proposals over the next couple of years. We have just, like I said, maintenance related items, so parking lots. We have several parking lots and like beyond, repair mode, striping of our parking lots. And the reason why I talk about Maywood School is we had Maywood Park we still have money in for like a master plan for the park. And in this version, I had engineering and a construction project. I recommending that we get a little bit better focus on what we're going to do actually with the school long term before we kind of finalize park, because those two are going to be kind of symbiotic in what we do there. And so that one gets dropped off at least temporarily. We are working with the school district on potential options, and we hope to have something the next 6 months to a year of a plan, or at least a recommendation to both boards about how we're looking to proceed.
After the 5 years,
Correct.
and we're in year.
We're finishing year one, the first year, so we're starting year two. But that process of planning and making decisions never happens sooner.
Sure.
The way the budgets are set up, things.
Okay.
And if we were to make changes to that facility to not be available at the end of 5 years. At least a couple of years notice of what to do.
Sure.
So those are kind of the big ticket items, is that we've got a Nichols Road reconstruction project, but 2 projects, let me back up. We anticipate Tony want the trail road construction project to be included in the budget, hopefully, and constructed next year. That would be all underground work and repaving most of Tony Watt Trail down to Arrowhead Park. We have a couple of small projects with, drinking fountains and access to water. Yeah, Wild Haven that's been in the budget. I would consider those to still be introduced and hopefully approved as part of that road construction project. We also have the Public Works working on with federal grant is reconstruction of Nichols Road. And that has been, of course, depending on what's going to happen with the public safety building on whether things get changed to the project, but that would include all of Nichols from Winnequa Drive to Winnequa, and especially around this area right here, how it interacts with the pool, the orientation of how buses come into school, how we now have a bus stop right here, all that coordination, the pool entrance and how we anticipate potentially the parking with pickleball and the tennis courts and the pool. Special events, including the festival, and where that project, I would anticipate I would be asking for funding for some design considerations. Part of that construction project, because I think road, we're potentially adding off-street bus and tons parking area, how that interacts with where our bike parking is and how we enter the pool and there. So that will be a project that I think that you don't see now that would be in there. Those would be probably the 2 or 3 projects that I'm looking at. Anything else is gonna be kind of dependent on what our funding happens to be. So future agenda item will be talking about where our current fund balance is from parkland dedication, what projects, and then whether or not we make a recommendation to the mayor and the board about what we look at. Is it like 50/50 each project? Is it just spend it while we have it? You know, some communities are doing a little bit of both in that area. We just never had that. We've never had kind of any parkland dedication almost as long as I've been here, or it's been tied to a very specific project. So we have 2 or 3.
What's our balance? Right.
I think we're at like 500,000,
Okay.
and that's before Monona Pines or potential.
Yep.
You know, all the ones that are in the hopper. Elaborate on that, but there is more, and we anticipate. But I would anticipate at least 1,000 units of multi. Spikes.
Yeah, possibly one.
Correct, possibly. So that also includes, there's, what I will probably bring next meeting is capital budget amendment to conduct an impact fee study. And what that does is looks at all the new population and what the amenities to be included. So on top of what we're currently charging per unit, which is another fee that we charge to developers because of the impact those developers have. Most specifically, it could potentially impact positively towards any future tunnel, because that was a part acquisition or the new features that we don't have. So it's a little bit complicated. It's not something that we do internally, but I think for the price off, it's probably moving, because at some point we have to decide what those development fees are. And this board has never really had a voice in what those fees should be, and it's supposed to be a process of determining what those fees should be. So I think it would be good to do within our budget situation.
Pat, you had a question?
Yeah, I do, and my question has to do with the part-time dedication. If these as anticipate that money coming in and how it might be used. Can that be? And all the plans they're looking at take time, so it's going to be a while before things happen. Can that money be invested to be earning some interest for us so that it's as our costs increase, that also increases in value?
It does, but you have to spend it within the funds. So there, any of our borrowed money is accruing interest when we spend it.
There's a significant, it's a pretty decent rate too.
Is it?
Typically.
Correct. So there is, I will get that question answered that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jake, you know, the popularity of the new pathways on the development part. Talked about the pathways, this part, with Nichols Road possibly getting changed and such, you know, is that on hold or is there potential for expanding staff system?
So for the Rachel's online and in here, yes, this is, so the other big ticket item this year that we'll be talking about as it relates to the capital budget is what we're doing with the Green Park. So it's past its 20-year life, there's lots of defects and damages and repairs and parts no longer available. The use of it has significantly altered kind of Winnequa Park, I would say, and sometimes good, sometimes not so good with the amount of use that it gets. We need to have a community discussion about what to do with that playground. And how it relates to whether or not we go to a complete park master plan, or we just isolate to the playground, and then as we move towards moving forward with a park path system, whether or not we need to invest a complete community engagement, with a community of multiple phases of improvements at the park long term, or we just focus solely on kind of like pedestrian access path system through the park. So I think that's up for debate and discussion, but certainly we need to have some sort of path with the replacement cost of that playground is between $750,000 and $1 million. Maintaining the existing wood structure also has a cost that could be upwards of $500,000. And so there is an option of doing nothing, but the doing nothing means it just gets less, swings get taken out, things get taken out. But it is at a point where we can't really maintain, like the stain isn't taking anywhere to the wood. There's component slides that are made. We did have a report done, now it's 6 or 7 years old, that showed some of the flaws, some of the opportunities. There has been some cases in Wisconsin where they've renovated their existing one and added to it features. The most notable is the cross, and sending that. Yeah, on it, but that was close to $1 million just to renovate. So I'm not confident the bandwidth of our community to raise that type of money, and I'm not sure I would be recommending borrowing putting that much money. Like,
Do you recall what percentage of private fundraising was done on Dream Park?
100%.
100%.
Yeah,
Okay.
so through 10 years, it was all privately raised to build a playground and maintain it. And then that was the deal after 10 years. And since that was right when I started. So 18 years, we probably put $200,000 into maintaining it, between the staging and the painting and the
Like I know Sun Prairie they have a nonprofit group for their Dream Park
Right.
that raises money like on a regular basis, but we don't have it.
Correct. So those would be kind of the 2 or 3 big items that you can anticipate hearing me about, and hopefully talking to neighbors and friends, and whether or not we engage into. I would like to engage in a community discussion, and if there will be lots of sentiment involved in it, because it is near to a lot of people that grew up and had a fingerprint in their first or second grade, and I live here with their kids, because I know of several that are in that situation. But the reality is, all things, get replaced or taken out at some point, and you have to decide, what value that has to it, the community in the park, and whether or not what funding mechanisms are. So
I'd also like to know how many new playground structures we have put in Monona in those 18 years, because I feel like there's so many new great little pockets.
So everything else,
Spreads everyone out too, which is kind of nice.
everything else has gotten replaced except for the playground we put in fire. So that little place that had fire is from 1997.
Fireman's Pond.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything else has been replaced unexpectedly. So even Oneida Park, which was 2007, if you're looking at what we typically use as 20 years as the lifespan for a playground. So some of our ones that we've done since then, now, if they're still adhering to the federal guidelines and the surfacing is in shape, I'm not interested in replacing place. And I think these metal structures have put that from the playgrounds from the 90s to the 2010s, I think the 2010 playground was something that they can last.
Cost.
Well, right, they're just the cost of just what I would consider like a fleet park or Bridge Road Park now, if you were to do the accessible surfacing on this. Like that would be the budget number that I would be putting at a playground. So.
Do we get incidences of people with splinters and that sort of injuries there or anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's more like bees.
Okay.
There's more bee wasp nests up in the towers and ground. Things of that nature, but yeah, there is wood issues with it there, and then there's nails that pop out, original nails that rust on and the pop out. So it is a little bit more of a maintenance challenge than that.
Not quite a tetanus factory yet.
I mean, it's still one that both my kids enjoy, and I'd probably say it's their favorite, so. It's a favorite, all right.
Yeah.
But it is, but it's, you know, like this time of year, and this is just kind of discussion about how our parks, the popularity of our parks are. We might see 7 to 10 buses in a single day towards the school year, with hundreds to thousands of kids coming from other areas. And, you know, it's a free park, it's open, but there's cost to having all those people use your facilities, and whether or not they leave it crash free or whatever it may be, and then, you know, you have that all on a Friday that comes in, have a paid rental on Saturday. It can be very challenging to kind of continue to maintain our central park, with so many people there for kind of singular use. Because of the player, which is, you know, for some, it's a great, they love it, and it's great that we have so many people, but there is a maintenance end. So I would think those would be the ones that we're gonna be talking about. Other than that, it just looks like equipment replacement. If we are able to get the storage facility constructed this year, that leads to some potential future equipment that we use for maintaining our turf and athletic fields that we can store there, but we're not doing that until we have a place to store it.
Any other questions regarding the capital budget plan?
So if you think of things, feel free to just email or message if things are coming up or things that are on your mind as committee members, or things that you're hearing from people in the public. Those are all awesome that we can have as like options. But I think when the instructions come out officially, you know, it's the requests last year were $12 million for this year for capital budget. We funded, I think, 4 million, maybe 4.5 million. And then the debt service, what we pay back on our credit card or loans, was about the same. We're paying back between $4 and $5 million, so principal and interest that, and we're trying to borrow less, so we bring down the debt capacity of what we can spend. But it's really challenging when you have 11 or 10 departments that have aging facilities and equipment that needs to get replaced in projects, and eventually that pushing back of stuff has its own costs to it. Effectively to, you know, feature its costs.
So like pushing it back or eliminating it?
Correct.
Yes.
Or just it just gets eliminated, and so anything with the parks, I think is really has to be. There's lots of stuff that I would like to do and see. I think we've been really fortunate to have lots of great improvements over the last 15 to 20 years, and so some of those may have to wait, or we may have to say this is a priority for the park system in the next 5 years. Moving outside of that, have separately funded fundraise for just impacted. That may that one of what we're doing. So I wanted to bring it now because as the weather gets nice and everyone's out about, start asking you guys why this is that way, why that's that, or are we gonna do that eventually? And these are good questions to have and go from there.
All right, anything from Rachel or Rachel? Just to make sure, okay. If there's no other questions about it, moving on to the nutrient management plan update for Weatherfields.
All right, so this has been on my mind for a long time, and how we maintain our park spaces and how we handle invasive species and how we handle pests around our facilities is one that we have never codified into an actual policy. In the back of your packet is the actual policy that was approved in 2003. Which is very restrictive on the use of pesticides and chemicals and managing spaces. And it also, you know, this was before, I think there was an actual park and rec record, it's everything in the public works director hands. And so as we continue to look at best practices and looking at our sustainability plan, looking at our parks and open space plan, and how those can merge collectively and how we can manage our properties in a way that is intentional and thoughtful, and gives us the flexibility to use nutrient management when, you know, there's kind of like a status of what parks would receive treatment, what parks don't, and what thresholds we do that. And specifically, you know, we are openly violating existing policy now with how we manage our athletic fields at Huska Park. So those are treated, fertilized, and that is intentional for the play that's put on those fields. We have treatments that we do for some of our invasives, and so what we've seen with the weather swings that we've had is that we get this period of drought, latitude, we get massive amounts of thistle, buckthorn, burdock, what else are we getting? Just stinging nettles, wild parsnips. So these are damaging, like, to human type of invasives that start to overcrowd some of our more natural plantings that we have. So, like, for example, if you walk here in the next couple of weeks along the lagoon, that project that Dredge in North Lagoon included a really nice bio mix of plantings. And what has happened is, you know, without any sort of management, prescribed burn, is it gets overtaken. Thistle, it gets everything else that starts to choke out that natural. So for discussion purposes, you know, I put together at least just a draft version. McFarland has what I would consider excellent policy that they incorporated into the ordinance that goes through kind of highlighting what parks would potentially receive what treatment after what was done, you know, naturally, volunteers, etc. And I think this would be helpful to kind of have that discussion. We do have our staff going through a pesticide operator training and how that can be best applied. We do have contracted services for rodent control around our buildings. And where this comes from is if you go to Oneida Park, look at the amount of birds and spiders and bird poop that happens on it. They start to take over, you know, birds start to take over, that impacts, you know, the bottom line of revenue production where people stop landing because there's too much bird debris and, you know, spiders all over the place. And so in the packet and more for future reading is kind of a synopsis or summary of what I put together. And then it also has McFarland's vegetation management use policy. This has been kind of copied by multiple communities across Dane County as what they're doing. It has different category of areas and looks at weed density, whether it be turf or whether it be invasive management. The one for here that we're noticing especially is, you know, Maywood Park. When you're putting 100+ feet on that park, it's already having compaction issues with turf. We do have pockets of these, you know, stinging nettles and wild parsnips and, you know, things that are gonna harm our kids and have issues. So we need to be able to look at how we can modify those in a way, and it's a subject in this town that generates a fair amount of discussion and some opposition to any sort of use of chemicals. And so we have managed Woodland Park in that manner where it's a combination prescribed burns, it's a spot treatment, planting of native species. So there's a multifaceted approach to it. And that would be an area. And we will be continuing to do that with contract service funding. So there is the potential for some of this things to be contracted out. And so cities kind of have been battling this, like what we have for capacity for our existing staff to do more hand holding and maintenance, you know, what we have for volunteers versus what we need to like look at other options. And so this is just really the first point in introduction. I would hope that we will bring this back for discussion. As part of the operating budget, and like have something that you say, but it's just a straight no. And that we can have this community conversation of why things work both a certain way or why we are. So, but just since I've started, it's like, it's really, I don't want to say out of control, but the ability to maintain landscaping beds and turf area is incredibly challenging. So I think it's one that we can take a thoughtful approach. And I do believe this ordinance that McFarland went through, and they went through a pretty long process, is pretty good. And some of the people that we work with that have also done similar, Stoughton has done something similar. Overall, they said it's been working pretty good. And once you get these kind of under control, like anything else, it's much easier to start. So that's in your packet. That will be posted online to look at, and then the original ordinance policy that was from 2003 is also included. So it does have kind of a challenge of how we maintain certain facilities that work. But like Grand Crossing, for example, is held to more of a higher level than, you know, the west side of stuff that grows up in the back of the park on the east side.
Just I look at it, it's beautiful. Although the traffic right there is tenfold what it used to, be, which is great. You know, it's nice to see people using it. The bridge helps. Yeah. And during COVID, it really came up during COVID.
Jake, one of the things that I think you started maybe 2-3 years back is aerating the parks.
Yeah.
Is that working or?
So aeration really helps with compaction. It introduces oxygen into the soil, so it does help with turf compaction. It's not necessarily helping with like weeds or nail or anything. That would be more of either intense overseeding particular area, so we can put money in grass seed and try to get more grass to grow and crowd out some of the weeds. Or it can be a treatment type of situation where you're adding fertilizer and nutrients, you know, on an area. But when you look at kind of our high traffic, high visibility areas, like they don't get much of a chance to recover. You know, we're dealing with that kind of on volunteer, and we have an area house that's really, you know, heavy traffic use, same areas day after day after day. We're dealing with that, and so that part of like aeration does help with it. And but as we look at manage, I mean, it's very often the irrigation sprinklers can water that grass frequently, but like that has issues with the ice rink, so we have to really put money into kind of fertilization and have to get back, you know, after a rain season, or just how we do our own yards. Drier out, start to water, and the grass will grow and answer. So I think there's certain areas where, at least from my perspective, there's a desire to have better turf. And I think it's also an appetite with the correct amount of funding that we can turn some turf back into prairie. We've talked about that sustainability and sustainability committee, but it's not just the same as letting stuff go. Like you don't just stop mowing and expect a prairie to happen. It's a multi-year.
It's work. Yes.
It's work, and we don't want to necessarily try to do that on our own because we will fail. I guarantee we will fail. It's just 5 city staff. It has to be a larger scale type of project, and so I think we're kind of taking that on with what we'll be doing with Wilderness Park, and it's kind of look at what I would consider new operating budgets are with some of the extra funding we got through the referendum. But that's going to ebb and flow about where that contract is money to go. But certainly that to me is like a trade-off of like it's easy for park maintenance. Easiest thing for us to do is sit on a 10-foot wide mower and just mow grass. We get No obstacles, just straight grass, mow everything, very easy, it's not complicated at all. Start putting trees and benches and, you know, native areas in there, well, that gets a little bit more time consuming. But from kind of a holistic, you know, sustainable practice is what we want in a park system, of course, we want all of that. Paths and we want nice good shade trees, we want some natural areas, focus, you know, play areas and field areas, and sometimes those might mix together, sometimes they need to be kind of separated. I think that is potentially all leading to, for the central park, whether it's a complete park master plan discussion about how this all gets kind of phased in and implemented, but I'd at least officially like to have a conversation with this board and with council about the benefits of having a policy that we can point to. Because every time we do have to spray for a particular reason, there is a flag. There will be multiple calls on the why or sort of, you know, with being around children, all of our parks, it is a sensitive area, but. If you have a policy that's been well thought out, discussed and has been a multi-layered approach to it. It reduces maybe some discussion and first plan proper. So, those are kind of the two major initiatives that. Next 5 months, it gets really busy this time of year with everything, so we have operations, but. This is probably a good time to discuss it as part of capital budget. Operating budget. And. What initiatives will be.
Questions for Jill?
So
No?
Jake, your plan, your preference would be to get this kind of refined and implemented then, like within the next 5 months, you're saying?
Yeah, I would like it to be part of the operating budget discussions, so anytime we have, whether it's an ordinance change or policy change. That might have a fiscal impact because it might include contracted service for adding a treatment plan for the soccer fields at Winnequa Park, for example. That would have a potential change of where some of our funding goes. So ideally, I'll bring this back for kind of further discussion for next month and look at this particular ordinance. I just know when I researched this a couple of years ago and came across what Charlotte's doing and then have contacts at the village there, it seems to be working quite well because it has designated areas that are, you know, A parks, B parks, C parks, so you have some areas like Three Meadows that we do absolutely not. Natural area. You might have sport fields that have or in a classification that do that we're actually using for athletics and we're making sure we have or we have a threshold of what we do. So what happens is they do these like grid searches if it's for like just say an athletic field and say you have in a square 2 feet, you have 2 dandelions, so that's two weeds that are weeds. Well, that doesn't trigger in then a treatment for that particular season because you're already doing pretty well. So you kind of manage it and kind of on fluctuable on point. So it also is a little bit more like instead of saying, well, yeah, we treat 4 times a year no matter what. You know, we have spring fertilizations, summer, and you can look at like a Huska football field right now. It's pretty good. You might see like 1 game, and outside of 10 sports, thousands. Well, that field is going to be ready to go when it comes time for a tackle football. It's healthy enough turf, and it's going to be able to stand up to the rigors of all the intense play out. And so, ideally, this gets introduced, and then we'll go through public input, and this would be a basis for an ordinance change or an official policy because it's. The policy itself from 2003 is just outdated, and it's not applicable to what we're actually doing and how we have to do certain things in our public areas, especially as it involves, pest management, for mice. Like, we get mice and bill, that is beautiful. I'm within a commercial building, I feel a little black box and, you know, that is just a reality of having. A facility, and especially if we have applicable health codes that we have to follow, that we have to take care of those things. So I think just having it out there, to me, and open of like, here's what we're doing in practice, here's what we like to do. Here's kind of the methodology that we've talked about as a board about these are the classifications of different park areas. So I think that would be like next step, just to ideally look at this McFarland example, different classifications, and then what we can go with, and if there's anything that we can adopt, and then take public input and comment on it, discuss here, recommendation to council for consideration, for adoption, and then implementation.
Yes, this is helpful. I know just at Sandown Manor, when we did this for cleanup,
Right.
people were asking, what pesticides, if any, are being used there. Some of the questions were in regard to noticing invasive species and wondering how that was being managed. Somebody asked because there were some things there that might be edible and could they pick them and eat them and
Right.
they're safe.
Right.
A wide range. So, yeah, I'm sure you get those questions all the time.
Correct.
Any other questions for Jim regarding this? Seeing none, we'll move on to the 2025 operating budget updates.
I didn't have anything printed out, so I will defer that item to the next, other than just a general point, we've had. Some rather significant revenue increases on the recreation side from our summer camp, where we talked about the numbers from what we budgeted for. And corresponding a significant expenditures. For after school and summer camp, so. From that perspective, I think we will be fine with what the levy. This year, but then first will be off. The other large number is what we're really struggling with right now is our credit card processor that we have with our software. The fees that were being assessed are really significant with the system that we have. From what I budgeted, so I clearly underestimated. We switched a lot of our families that from using credit card payments to ACH, which was a standard checking and transfer, and that's helped.
What's the percentage?
Oh, it's. It,
We're very between like 5 and 6% overall, but we're bringing in 1.6 million.
Yeah.
Is what we were budgeted for, and we're probably closer to like 1 point. Look, we're over on summer campaign a lot, so we're just bringing in an overall a lot of money via our credit card processing server. So yes, we under budgeted for what we are bringing in originally. We are looking at switching currently to a different credit card processor. So we're in the works of that right now, and they just gave me the proposal back last week, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to look at it specifically. I don't think that there's any way of changing it before pool season, but we would be looking at changing before after school next season, so September rollout to get a little better pricing on that.
I mean, it's
Cause
not uncommon to charge a fee for using credit cards.
we currently,
Oh,
but
you
we're
do?
getting charged on top of that
What's that?
fee, so we charge $45 for a class, customers getting charged $45 with fee. And we're really getting charged $50 because they charge the 3% on top of the, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of always hard to get ahead of the game on the credit card processing,
Sure.
which like Jake mentioned,
And
we're
there's-
trying to get a lot of our stack. Core families that are part of our payment plan options on that ACH, that is an option to save us and them money.
Yeah.
But we're overall just bringing in a lot of money, and
Yes.
at the pool per se, we're not recouping the credit card on cash transactions, because then that just makes more change. So then we're eating the cost of some of it as a city to provide a better customer service and and time to actually get people in, so you have to kind of weigh where are we eating some of our costs, where's our better customer service coming in by having some of these options out there.
We talked about this from a city perspective, the cost of licenses for like the software costs for just everything goes up significantly. The software that we use for reservations, registrations, or point of sale is all tied in. So if there's a convenience fee to like the online, some of that goes to the software system that we're using. So you pay a base fee per year, and then it's a per transaction cost as well. So the more money we make, the more money the software company makes.
3% and 30 cents per transaction that we get charged on top of the 10,000 that we pay for the.
So
overall.
it's expensive, but they're all
Yep.
similar to that.
Yeah.
And then there's only like a certain amount of credit card processors that synchronize with that software system. So we need to figure out whether it's still worth continuing to use the software system with one of their like authorized credit card processors, because we may get a better deal, but switching to a brand new software system is time, a lot of time for both us and the industry. You know, it's not as simple as just saying get rid of it, which some days I would like to say that. See these bills, software, or I try to use it correctly. Because they all are really good at like one or two things and they're not great at something else. So, but it is one of our biggest challenges is when the amount of revenue that we're bringing in, the software system, the credit card processing, the balancing of what account it goes into with our finance, department of one, and Jessica in this seat, it can be challenging. So those are some of the big numbers, and without the pool starting yet, I can already tell you that, we need to have a really hot summer, a lot of people, or we're gonna continue to use a lot of water and chemicals. Because it's with the age of the pool, the chemical costs have gone through the roof. I got locked in for a certain amount at a certain price, but it's, we'll say you never know. But I anticipated it being more than what even I budgeted, which I think we put in more money than we had last year, but the pool is always kind of a gamble from revenue expenditure point of view. So right now it's up and running. I'm not leaking a ton of water, which is good. We see us training Saturday, so.
Warm showers.
Sorry, director's report, although you kind of already did the director's report.
For the most part,
Yes.
yeah, this. And for Rachel being new on the board, April through May is the most incredibly busy part of our year for Missy and I, and Jess, I would say too, is just from. All the programs that are happening and getting ready for summer programs, bringing on staff, getting facilities open. We have. Two businesses that we basically run, one at the deck, there's a concession stand that has its own staff, one with the outdoor pool. We have all three, summer camp and the childcare, so we really have three main points of business. And that all has its own set of challenges. And then we have park operations, so. This is the time of year where I'm ready to just not be here. After working, I think 42 days straight now, I've calculated, because we don't get staff in until like now is when our college students, we have one start last week, one started this week, one starts tomorrow. It gets better, but a lot of the heavy lifting of what we do with parks and getting everything open from restroom facilities and drinking fountains and athletic fields. It's very cyclical, it's very predictable, and the amount of time that Missy and I and our staff put in this time of year, getting everything up and running for enjoying our awesome programs and events. So first beer garden was last Wednesday. Pretty good.
Oh, wow.
Pretty good.
It's awesome. I missed it.
Well, you can come this next Wednesday.
Had to work.
I was gonna say you probably have. They're good. So come to our beer garden and say hi. Let's see what else. Anything?
I think you mentioned most of it. Pool is on the 31st for the season, and then we, are off running from then. It'd be great. We do have new hours of operation for the season in regards to some changes in our open swim and our aqua times and lap swim. We did add some early morning lap swim hours, if you all remember, so spread the word that it changed. I'll be doing my best for the next 2 weeks to remind people that it's changing, but yeah. Additional hours.
Just one thing I wanted to mention, I think you probably all know, but maybe not, but John Shield, the person who done the garden at San Antonio, the last 45 years roughly, passed away. And the people have been asking, is anything happening over there in his honor? So what is happening at the right now, since the this is a transition time, so we're going to move forward with the master plan. There has been a memorial fund set up. It's a private fund, so it's not on the public stand on the website. But if you get asked, if people do ask me about that, proceeding at some point, John's wife Jean has said she would love it if there'd be something to see the place in the lakes for people to enjoy. So as the park is developed and it's made to see the sign, that's probably what would happen. But there is an account in his name set up to hold that down. So we need to ask that question.
Thank you for sharing. Any other questions or comments for staff? Seeing none, can I entertain a motion to adjourn? And all those in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
It could be fast. Rachel, I saw you the parks tour. I'll email you with some new dates.